Welcome back to another episode of Taking Inventory. This week, we welcome back Andrew Covato, friend of the podcast, to talk all things measurement. Andrew, so glad to have you back.
Great to be here, guys. I'm loving being a regular here on the pod, and it's always a spicy conversation. So looking forward to another one today.
Yes, and I re-welcome you as well, as Daniel said. This week, I thought a really interesting place to start is like there's just a ton going on with sort of the measurement world and also kind of data collaboration in terms of ad tech. And I think maybe a good place to start is this news that came out today that Snap, our former employer, has sort of, as Ad Age described it, opened up the walled garden a bit to Video Amp for cross-media planning. And, a quick read of it, that's against both the video and AR inventory. So, Andrew, wanted to get your take. Like, what does this mean? Is this first of many? Is this a big deal, or is this just a PR stunt? Like, what's the state of play?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really an interesting play. I think it's a smart play from Snap. Probably the first of many, if I had to guess. And I think it does mark a departure from what I would say was the historic strategy that most walled gardens had employed, which is, hey, we're a walled garden. We're not going to let anybody peek behind the doors. We're going to own the way that we do these kind of data integrations. Like think back to the Nielsen and Meta collaborations and deals that have been made. It was always really in favor of Meta. And obviously I don't know the mechanics of how any of these data exchanges are happening between Snap and Video Amp, but I do think what I would assume is happening is some kind of privacy enhancing collaboration, opening up the audiences, the inventory to Video Amp to allow media planners to look in and understand where and how they can buy on a platform like Snap. So I think it's really smart for Snap to be doing this. Giving more visibility to potential advertisers is only going to make it easier for them to buy on the platform. B, I think it's also smart for Video Amp, to be maybe the only place where you can do this on a platform like Snap. It's going to draw more people, more media planners to that service. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of this happening. And with all of the advancements that we've seen in the last few years on privacy enhancing technology, it probably makes the starting point of these deals that much easier. Whereas a few years ago it would have been a hard no. We're not going to allow this to happen. Maybe we'll do some kind of custom integration to campaign measurement. We're not going to open up the whole inventory and let planning happen. That's the kind of change from that is I think really meaningful and could be huge for Snap, could be huge for Video App.
Yeah, I think what's cool about it too is that it's still like it doesn't break like this sort of API first structure that like the walled gardens have adopted. And so I think to some extent, I think people kind of thought like one day they'd have to fold and like really kind of play ball with OpenRTB. I feel like that ship has sailed, and it's going to be
no. I mean, I know where you were going with this, James. I totally agree with that. I don't think that there is a meaningful reason to be dumb pipes, which I think is terminology that a lot of folks had used back in the day. We don't want to be dumb pipes, and I don't think that there is a reason for that to happen. But there's a compromise between fully just being an inventory source and letting custom bidders and any old DSP have access to your inventory versus being an API buying platform that lets you peek at the right data to make informed decisions. So I like the direction this is going. I think that more needs to happen, and this is calling all of the platforms, all of the walled gardens on the dance floor, really, right? Like the last fig leaf to fall is going to be, let us do real proper measurement, at a user level with some privacy protections in place. Let us get back to a world where we can do user level randomized control trials, get the measurement done correctly, and maybe layer some models on top of that to simplify it. And so you don't have to do that in perpetuity, but we're maybe inching towards that world again with privacy enhancing technologies that are facilitating some of these kind of opening the kimono type deals, and generally the the change in attitude to allow that to happen. So those two things combining, maybe with a little push from the advertiser side, will maybe get us to that world where we've got some more, just some more transparent measurement and better measurement.
Andrew, do you think though there's like a risk of as these deals take place that advertisers kind of get forced into certain measurement methodologies or certain vendors, and so you start to create these little fiefdoms of measurement providers over time, or does this truly, in your mind, start to open up that transparency, open up the market, and actually become more, I guess, democratic for measurement?
It's a great point. I think in the short term, it does do the former, where you've got a couple of providers. A video amp, great example here. Where I would love to see something like this evolve is maybe creating more of a framework where any provider can go in and access the same data in the same privacy safe way. And again, I'm making assumptions that there are these right privacy enhancing technologies powering this deal. I assume there would be, but assuming that is the case, right? You could imagine a world where it's more of an open ecosystem where any provider could go in and access that same data. I think again, if you do that, if you create that ecosystem correctly, you aren't going to be beholden to any specific measurement methodology. Anybody would have access to the same data, and you can analyze it, in almost an enumerable. You can kind of throw any methodology you want at it, right? And so I do think longer term, if this is a first step or canary in the coal mine to that world of an open ecosystem, it's a really, really positive, hopeful situation. But long way to get there, and the line could be drawn where we're only going to allow media planning and this kind of reach and frequency assessment and that kind of thing. So I'm not gonna ring the victory bells just yet. We've got a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I read recently along the lines of both like data collaboration and Snap is I think a buddy of ours, Kevin Longo, did an interview on Beat.tv and talking about how like for Snap, like AR is sort of their key to differentiating for retail media. And I think it really highlighted, and he talks about the interview, just a bunch of the different partners that they're dealing with, but it does seem to be that like all of these RMNs and really kind of anyone now that has data is becoming an audience syndication platform. And I think to your point, because of privacy enhancing technology, it's actually like possible. But
Mm-hmm.
from your seat right now, of in terms of like how easy is it for all these people to do that? How easy is it for them to measure it? Like, do you think this is a trend we're going to keep seeing? And another maybe just anecdote to that is I Googled retail media the other day, and it was like, it's Costco, it's Lowe's, it's Homeland, which is like a small chain in Oklahoma. I mean, like everyone's doing it, but everyone is going to be supply constrained. So do you think this continues to be the trend where these guys are packaging up audiences, sending them around, and this data collaboration piece is going to keep on being the way of doing it?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I'll react to one thing quickly. I'm not sure I see how AR specifically is something that helps retail media. I feel like that's maybe a bit of a marketing ploy, and kudos to our buddy Kevin for throwing that out there. But I think the bigger picture, it's more about having inventory sources, and more importantly than inventory sources, the ability to get into those inventory sources with the privacy enhancing technology that you kind of mentioned. So assuming that all that infra is solid, great. You can deploy ads through AR on Snap. We're using data from some of these other sources. That's like a flywheel that can definitely keep going. But I don't know if AR specifically is anything magical for retail media. But going back to the other thing, the bigger trend, I think and we've talked about this, I think, on this pod. I've talked about it elsewhere as well, and you guys have. People are waking up. Platforms that have a ton of zero and first party data are waking up to the fact that, wow, this could be monetized. And before, it was maybe a little more challenging to monetize it because you had to have the right contract. You still obviously do have to have the right contracts, but even with the right contracts in place, there was a lot of reticence to data matching, and you need to have the right technologies to be able to to merge audiences and connect them to inventory sources in a privacy safe way. That has really changed over the last couple of years. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for companies with large swaths of zero and first party data to monetize it. However, and I mean, we all have experienced this in some of the work that we've been doing together. It's not as simple as like, here's some data, make money from it. There's so many steps to becoming an ad platform or even an audience, an audience platform where you can export that audiences. It's not just as simple as having the data. There's legal implications, there's technological implications, biz dev and partnership implications. And then, let's say you've solved all of those, which by the way, could be a multi-year journey for many people and for many organizations. Beyond that, there's the go-to-market. There's, the how do you compete in the context of a world where everybody is a media network? How do you compete against everybody else, right? Why are your audiences better, right? If you're providing a first-party buying surface, buying interface for ads on your platform or others, why is yours a better place for people to go than your competitors? And then say you solve that, you've then got the measurement and the performance problem, right? If you're going to provide some rudimentary, not very good measurement, and you're not going to allow flexibility for third parties and or access to the data to do custom analytics, people aren't, advertisers are not going to really trust the data that's going in there. And so it's a multi-layered, multifaceted problem. But I think the space in general is a humongous opportunity, and really there is an opportunity, for a platform that has the raw data, that has the foundations for a great ad platform, that can partner with somebody that can shepherd them through that journey. That to me is the best of all worlds, right? Like we've seen it a bunch where really sophisticated companies, maybe not in an ads context, but in other technological aspects, are very sophisticated, try to get into ads, and they significantly underestimate the challenges of how to bring that to market and how to fight there. And so, that's really, I think, the massive headwind to making this, whole space blow up.
Yeah, and
more than it has.
And I mean, I think too, like as James, you're saying, like when you Google it, there's just everyone's a retail media network. I think Delta has coined themselves as a travel media network, right? Since they're not retail, and so you're getting kind of just this massive fragmentation and confusion in the market. And so I think kudos actually to Kevin Longo at Snap and that team. We spoke with Patrick Harris a few weeks ago. I mean, that they're really leaning to what I think you're talking about, Andrew, of like the trust and support. And like, there's just confusion in the market, right? Like, how do I pay for these audiences? What audiences are going to work for me as an advertiser? How do I go activate them across Snap and TikTok and Meta and Google and wherever else? How do I measure that? And how do I make sure that I'm iterating to actually improve my ROI or my, my outcomes? And so I think, to Longo and to some of the other teams out there, like, again, kudos to them for actually shepherding these advertisers through that process and partnering with the retailers, because this is an experiment for everyone, right? Nobody knows with 100% certainty this is going to work, and this is a proven method, for years to come. And so it is interesting to watch. I think there's a lot of excitement, but it just, we're in the first the first inning. And so I think we still have a lot of ways to go to actually see this through and see what we can start to do with it beyond just, here's 1,000 people I want to reach on Snap.
It's funny because Drew, me and you had this conversation the other day, but it's like the RMNs, this isn't, I wouldn't say for all of them, but in some ways they really are becoming like the new agency, right? Like they have the customer relationships.
Yeah.
They can control the demand. They don't really have the supply, and they have data, right? So it's like an agency with data is basically what they're becoming. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? And I think you'll see now, like to some extent, like I'd be curious to see like when I bet you like Meta will be one of the first, a couple of years from now where like RMN derived spend could be like equal to like the holdcos, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
And that messes with things. I mean, I obviously I'm kind of just, the holdcos are complicated. And so I have a complicated point of view on them, but it's something that's like not really being talked about, I think. And it makes a lot of sense. And I wonder if you'll see just some form of aggregation around the RMNs. I know, James Avery from Kevel is like, obviously a friend of the pod and working on ways to make that all easier for like the demand side to play nicer together. But I'm curious to see if they really do become the agencies, and maybe you find some of these RMNs stand up like collaborative agencies together, right? Like that
Yeah,
wouldn't be a crazy thing to do.
I totally agree. I love that thought process and kind of that projection, James. I think it makes a ton of sense. I agree that there inherently must be some kind of consolidation over time. It's just not feasible. If you've got like 30 or 40 different top retailers that are all offering retail media networks, and you've got travel companies offering travel media, you got X, offering XMN, right? There's just too many, right? How do you work across all of those? And maybe agencies pivot to being able to more effectively work all across them. But ultimately, for these things to be successful and for the measurement to be right, you've got to do some major infrastructure, work to be able to synchronize the audiences across the different networks. And I think we're still pretty far away from that. There's maybe some advancements in there, and a couple of companies that are trying to work with that, but ultimately it's still it doesn't feel like there are enough subterranean tunnels between the walled gardens. It just feels like there are more walled gardens with higher walls, for now. But to your point, James, I think that will eventually have to break down. Like, advertisers are going to get fed up with it. You can't just have like 20, 30, 40, 50 different walled gardens that you're working with. It just doesn't
Yeah,
make
and
sense.
it's funny you say it because it's sort of the same dynamic to some extent. I think what happened with the trade desk and the agencies, where it's like the agencies should be the ones to do this, but they're going to have to build tech, and that's just not what agencies do historically. And
Yeah.
so there's probably some massive company that may not even be built yet, that comes in and connects it all and sort of becomes that. I think that's probably not like a horrible thesis.
No, and I think there are some companies that are, again, starting to do that. I would look in the privacy enhancing technology space. I think that's going to be the starting point to all of this, right? Yes, there is great analytics and optimization that can be layered, but unless you're able to synchronize the audiences across in a privacy safe way that does not violate any regulatory or OS regulations or policies, right? That's where it's got to start, right? Once you have that base in place, you can do a lot of cool things on top of it. But there has to be a willingness for all of these retail media networks to collaborate, and for that willingness to exist, there has to be a commercial, reason for that to happen. I don't think we've quite seen that yet. I think everyone is maybe, that's building a retail media network, or retail X net or X media network, is maybe overestimating the the advertisers' propensity to use their platform as the go-to starting point for buying, for media buying. And I bet you a lot of folks that are building these XMNs maybe haven't sat in the buyer's shoes, and don't understand the challenges that are being faced by the modern media buyer. And so yeah, I think it's great. I don't think that the current trajectory is going to be the long term trajectory. There's got to be consolidation. There's got to be just making life easier for the media buyer.
And are you seeing on the measurement side of it, because advertisers are utilizing so many different uh, retailers, platforms, and the it's just becoming so expansive. Are you seeing new measurement providers, new methodologies pop up, and like what are some of those? And one I know everyone in the industry hears a lot is MMM, media mix modeling. Can you explain that and how that fits into kind of the, as you put it, the current trajectory of where we're on, and just the fragmentation?
Totally, totally. There are a couple of smaller companies that are focused on retail media measurement. None of them, in my opinion, really stand out as having solved the problem very holistically. Some have some pluses and minuses. Overall, I don't think you necessarily need a retail media specific measurement company, but more to what you were saying, Daniel, is get a methodology that can work across the different buying surfaces that you're, and channels that you're playing with. So MMM, great option for it for sure. Better still is MMM that's calibrated with some kind of incrementality study. Um, right now, probably the best way to do that is with geotesting. And so there's a number of providers, a lot of whom I work with, with Growth by Science, that are in the advisory fold, that are kind of have different feature sets that appeal to different advertisers, but ultimately some kind of triangulation between incrementality, MMM, and and some kind of attribution data to help apportion the credit a little bit more granularly. That's really probably what most advertisers go to should be. There's some cool things happening in causal inference above that, where you can estimate causal impact without having to do a holdout. But I still think that's while it's an interesting approach, you still need ultimately a holdout to be able to validate some of those models. So you can't really get away from a scientific experiment at some regular interval with some kind of structure, in my view. But if you have all those pieces in place, even a complex world of multiple retail media networks could be, you could wrangle it to a certain extent using some of those methodologies, and definitely have seen certain advertisers be able to do that reasonably successfully with the methodologies and approaches I just described.
And for your advisory business, just to shamelessly plug it because it is awesome, growth by science.
Thank you.
But are advertisers aware just of how, for lack of a better word, like scientific this is? Like it is back to being science, right? Like to some extent,
Oh yeah.
the days of it being, they get it.
Yes and no. The challenges that I'm seeing right now for advertisers is a couple, right? More than a couple. It's but they kind of there's a sort of few categories of challenges that are being faced. No, number one, I would say there is an education challenge still. An increasing number of advertisers are more open to the idea that, wow, post exposure, last touch, MTA, anything that's a path to purchase, framework for attribution. A lot more folks are understanding that that's not the desired approach, and should be taken with a grain of salt at best. But there's also still a ton of folks that are seeking out MTA providers and that think that MTA is the be all end all. And whenever I get on a call with some of these folks, I explain to them there are two problems with MTA. One, the data is not there. You're going to miss the walled garden exposures. You're just going to miss them unless you're getting the click out from them, right? You're going to miss all view exposures. Number one. Now, number two, you assume that the data is perfect. The methodology is still wrong. It's still correlative, right? And I spoke at Programmatic IO a few months ago on this exact topic. The way that platforms optimize, all ad platforms, pretty much, I would say without exception, is they're really good at finding people that are already on the cusp of performing a desired action and showing those people ads. And so you've got a cycle, self-fulfilling prophecy of showing ads to people who are already going to buy, crediting the ads for the purchase because they saw the ad first. And MTA falls right into that trap. And so you're not going to really understand where to deploy your media spend if you're using an MTA type approach. So the education is one piece. The other piece is a big technological challenge, and I think the reason for that is advertisers are on a varying maturity curve, right? Some of the ones that are newer, say, call it, are spending 50 million, 10 million or less a year in spend. Probably don't have the resources to build some full custom in-house. A lot of those advertisers, I think, can reasonably be successful working with one of the vendors that I work with as a measurement platform to get causal measurement into their stack. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. But when you start to get to the more enterprise level, 50, 100, 200, 300 million plus in ad spend, it's too nuanced. And I don't know if necessarily using just one of the out-of-the-box providers is sufficient for at least a good chunk of those advertisers. There are too many complexities. There's too many idiosyncrasies in how they're buying media, how they're organized from a marketing perspective. And so when you get to those enterprise level, you can still work with some of these providers, but you likely also need to invest a ton in your first party analytics stack. You maybe need to supplement, maybe you need to work with multiple providers or build some tooling in-house. And then you go to the extreme, the Pricelines, the Netflix, it's almost always totally in-house, totally custom. You basically rebuilt, a custom version of some of the measurement platforms that exist out there. And so there's this, and I would say people that are kind of on the cusp, advertisers that are on the cusp of those, and even the smaller advertisers that are spending even less, they're kind of stuck. There's not a lot of options for them to be able to, to get smart measurement. And so they're stuck doing hacky things, and they struggle to find the right path. And this is sort of, again, some of the work that we do at Growth by Science is to help navigate those complex issues. You can typically find a solution, but it's not a generic catch-all. It's very one-to-one for each advertiser. Yeah, sorry, and just I know I've been rambling a lot, but I'll give you a couple more challenges. So we had the education piece, we had the technology piece. There's also, like, I would say, the internal politics piece, where media buyers don't want to be judged in a way that they're not used to, or maybe don't fully understand. Executives don't really understand. They don't really want to spend the money to change their solution. There's too much integration into financial models with the existing attribution methodologies. It just gets too complicated to do a change management of a measurement infrastructure and measurement methodology change. And so that usually relegates new measurement methodologies to to silos within an organization, or it's like really watered down. And yeah, you've done some great incrementality work, but ultimately our last click model says this, and so budgets, bonuses, etc., are set on the last click. So maybe I'll cut off at those three. There's probably a few others that I encounter a lot, but those are the three. So like education, technology, and internal politics, bureaucracy, are the big holdbacks to getting smart measurement out there. And so, long story short, or long story less long, there's a ton of opportunity still for advertisers to adapt their measurement approach. And as of today, there are still tens, if not hundreds of billions of wasted ad dollars because of this problem.
And does that mean from just like a pure disruption point of view, like the brands, and usually we really don't talk a lot about this from the brand perspective on this podcast, but it is interesting to think about in this context. Like the ones that embrace the future could just like fundamentally wipe out their competitors, right? Like they're just,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'll give you a great example. You look at iOS 14, right, which I would argue was primarily a perception of performance problem versus a true performance problem. There were some advertisers that leaned in to iOS 14 and started buying like crazy. And if you look at incrementality data over that period of time, those folks saw actually an increase in performance, whereas everybody else thought that they were getting slaughtered. Last click was looking really terrible, right? They thought, wow, all of performance has gone down the hill, so let me pare back spend. But the reality of it is, true incremental performance didn't suffer that much, maybe not even at all, maybe even got better. And people that were measuring that way all of a sudden got super cheap auction prices because everybody was out of the auction, and were able to snap up users at a cut rate deals. And I would say, like, that opportunity still exists today, in maybe not as amplified as it was in that point in time, right? But it does still exist today, and for people who are measuring it correctly, I would liken it to an options trader that maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago was able to price options with Black-Scholes, where maybe that wasn't the standard at the time, and all of a sudden you've got this edge because you're measuring things correctly and you know the true price. It's the same kind of deal, right? Like, I would say, incrementality is the Black-Scholes of ad buying, and you can if you're starting to really understand the true value of things, you know where to spend and where not to spend.
There's our soundbite right there. This is the Black-Scholes of advertising. But I'm curious, like the education, the tech, like as you said, a lot of that is really affecting the enterprises. As you get to lower spend, like that, measurement's a problem, but it is not a problem to necessarily solve with the current set of solutions that are in market. But there are like simpler approaches, and maybe less sophisticated, but get you some kind of results or feedback. So like post-purchase surveys, panel surveys, even just sending out an email to current customers to get feedback. Like, what's your point of view on utilizing maybe some of those more simplistic approaches to like either get directional guidance or utilize that in marketing? Like, where does that fit in kind of your approach with clients?
Huge fan of that. we recently partnered with a post-purchase survey company, in advisory capacity, and I absolutely love the kind of visceral nature of the data that you get from that, right? Yeah, self-reported data, and if you take it in isolation, I wouldn't stake my career on it, but it is such a valuable data point that if coupled with other methodologies, like say an aggregate level holdout that almost any advertiser can perform, some kind of difference analysis if you can't really do geotesting, right? Or even some kind of pre-post discontinuity regression type analysis that you can do. Again, not like the best of the best, but these are all still like trying to find that causal relationship between your ad spend and your output. You couple some of those with like a post-purchase survey, and you maybe tweak the model and tune it a little bit, you can get some really, really great data. And I would honestly say that I would sooner look to something like that than like a platform last click type measurement as like the default for a smaller advertiser, right? And they're not really that expensive tools to be able to do that, right? Um, I guess I'll plug the partner here, Faring. I think they're a fantastic company, growing like crazy, and I think their post purchase surveys are incredible, and the data science that they put into it is really just a great suite of technology. So you couple like a data set like that, and you connect it with like I said, some of those other methodologies, or juxtapose it on an MMM or something like that. I mean, it's just like you will almost certainly get better visibility than if you look at what is my 7-1 conversions in Meta, Snap, Google, whatever.
Yeah, Covato, that I think all makes sense. I think before we let you go today, though, like so that our listeners can walk away with something like very tangible, because I think you covered a lot of ground. Like if you're an enterprise customer listening to this, or you're a maybe subscale advertiser listening to this, what are the tangible things that you would say, go do this today to even start that process of improving your measurement and your effectiveness?
Yeah. For an enterprise advertiser, I would say get your entire C-suite, CFO, CEO, CMO, everybody that's even tangentially related to marketing, to read up on incrementality, understand what it is, be able to talk reasonably intelligently to it. Just try to get that base level of understanding. None of these massive initiatives are going to ever happen if at the top people don't really understand, like don't have that aha moment of, wow, okay, this is really, really monumental for a business, and it can be, it's a billions and billions of dollar problem that we can fix with this methodology change. You get that at the starting point, and you get enough motivated executives with that mentality, all of the rest will figure itself out. It might be a hard, no, it will be a hard process, and by the way, one that Growth by Science we can help you navigate. But it's a process that can be undertaken, and I've seen a lot of companies, maybe not a lot, but the smartest companies I've seen go through that and have come out much better on the other side. For like a smaller company, um, do yourself a favor and don't use Google Analytics for your marketing performance. Just shut that off right away. Don't bother with that. I know it's free. I know it's a great tool for web analytics, and to understand how your website is working. It is a terrible tool for marketing analytics. So don't use it for that. Don't look at the platforms for that. Try to do a global holdout. Try to turn off your ads and see what happens in some geos. Educate yourself again on incrementality. I would say it's not as existential a problem as it might be for bigger organizations, because there's more on the line. The I would say the disparity between incrementality and some of the last click stuff is a lot worse, and can have more dire consequences for a bigger advertiser. But just because you're a smaller advertiser doesn't mean that you should default to measuring things incorrectly. Do yourself a favor and take some of those free tools with a big grain of salt. Look at tools like Faring. Look at some of the other measurement providers. Go on our website and you can look at some of our partners. All of them, I think, are doing a fantastic job, and have different feature sets that might be right for different advertisers. But and if you're not at the stage where you can work with some of those, look at doing a holdout yourself, right? Just experiment with it, see what you can do in a kind of skunk works way, and try to prove to yourself that, hey, this is a way that we can do marketing, and we can measure marketing. And I'll just leave on this. I've definitely worked with advertisers in a 6-figure a year marketing budgets, and we have done incrementality and incrementality only for their marketing measurement, and we've gotten it to work. So it is possible. You just have to know what you're doing. Again, we're here to help. If you're struggling, happy to answer some quick questions. If anyone wants to reach out, ping me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email, ac@growthbyscience.com. Happy to answer some quick questions, especially from smaller advertisers, just guide people, on the right path. I really see what we're trying to do here at our company is just to proliferate smart measurement out there, right? There's no reason to just gift billions and billions of dollars to ad platforms paying for conversions that you would have got anyway. Don't do that. Pay for conversions that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And, we're here to help with that.
I love that. As a former platform guy, it's like you're like Philip Morris selling anti-smoking. I
got the measurement patch right here.
Yeah. And then last question, maybe the most important of the pod. Next week, British Open. Who you got?
Ooh, tough one. I heard Rory had a monster round, so I haven't caught any of it yet. But we'll see. We'll see.
You taking Rory?
I think I think he wants it really badly. He's struggled a lot, and I love an underdog story. So I'm going to go with my man Rory.
The equivalent of a tier 2 walled garden. All right, I like the Rory pick.
But I'm gonna throw another curveball though. I'd be remiss to not mention my boy Mr. DeChambeau, who's just an absolute rock star. Love his contrarian approach and scientific approach to golf, which really, he was the reason I got into golf a few years ago. And so I gotta say, while I like the underdog story with Rory, I would be very happy to see Bryson up there as well.
Awesome. Well, we're going to check back with you on some of those measurement predictions, but more importantly, on the golf winners and losers in a few weeks. So, Covato, thank you so much for joining the pod. We'll have you back.
Love to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.